Coca-Cola, born in Atlanta, Georgia in 1886. It didn't appear in the UK until 1919, some 23 years later. McDonald's. First restaurant opened in the USA in 1955. First one wasn't opened in the UK until 1974. What I'm trying to say is these are sort of just ubiquitous soft drinks and fast food these days. We don't really think of them as specifically American imports. And I'm wondering if we're going to feel the same about the Corvette, because now for the first time that is going to be available in right-hand drive. So will we soon think of that as just another sports car available in the UK? Of course, this is actually a German chicken nugget, and that's a left-hand drive Corvette, but you get my point, don't you?
This is the launch of the new European spec Corvette, so this is what we'll be getting in the UK right-hand drive cars when they arrive. It's also my first time driving one of the new mid-engined C8 generation.
It's been a long time coming, but I've really been looking forward to getting behind the wheel of this. It's a really big, deep-chested V8 sound. It reminds me actually of the Mercedes turbocharged V8, that sort of deep sound, which also we find obviously in the Aston Martin Vantage. Love the autumnal colours this time of year. It's beautiful.
Of course, in the same way that American Coca-Cola is slightly different to the UK version because it's made with corn syrup, so the Euro Corvette isn't identical because it has to meet more stringent emissions regs. Its gas particulate filters mean the 6.2 litre naturally aspirated V8 has 482 brake horsepower as opposed to the equivalent US spec car's 495 brake horsepower. And it has 452 pounds-foot of torque compared to the 470 pounds-foot you get across the pond. That's a touch disappointing, but the price isn't. Yes, it's more expensive than in the US, but the Stingray will still start at £74,200 or less than a new M3 competition. Even if you go for one of the fully loaded launch editions like this one, the price only rises to £81,700, which is £3,000 less than the most basic 911 Carrera. The question is though, does it feel cheap? And the answer is no, it doesn't.
Overall, the first impressions when you get into this, I think are really good. I like the design of this. I think it's really interesting. It's obviously incredibly driver focused. We'll come back to these buttons in a minute, but the materials, they're excellent. We've got all this lovely Alcantara here, proper metal paddles. These buttons or sort of switches down here for selecting drive or reverse or neutral, really good quality, lovely metal feel to them here. Equally the dial up here, it's just interesting. The screen here feels really well placed, I'm not stretching for it. Even the square steering wheel, I actually quite like square steering wheels. We've seen them on Aston Martin before, and some of the Ferrari ones have been pretty square as well. This is interesting because I don't know which came first, the screen behind it or the steering wheel, but it clearly follows the edge of that screen so you can see straight through the top half. It does give us a slightly odd look because the top half is larger than the bottom half, which is the sort of the other way around to what you might expect. But really nice. There's also, if you look at the whole way this is set up with the two stalks here, there's a sort of, it looks a bit like the head of a, I don't know, a wasp or a bee or something like that. There we are. So in the UK, as standard, we get the LT2 specification. So most of this is part of that. It's just a little bits of carbon really, and in fact these seats which come as the LT3, which comes the launch edition cars, which is a little bit more expensive, but overall, I mean, what you get as standard in the UK is pretty extraordinary.
There's a heads-up display, a 14-speaker Bose stereo, heated steering wheel, heated and cooled seats, wireless mobile phone charging, Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, a camera at the back for the rear view mirror, a camera at the front that can act as a dash cam or lap recorder, a cuddly sorry. It has got all the toys though.
The only thing from the interior perspective that I was just a bit disappointed was in fact the seating position. You get in and instantly I was trying to get it lower down. After a while you forget about it, but yeah, those first impressions are sometimes crucial, and felt like I was a bit too up high. I've seen a few people criticising this sort of row of buttons down here. I quite like the look of them, and they are obviously physical buttons, which we obviously know we like, rather than just touchscreens. But I think it's one of those things you'd probably get used to as an owner because you'd learn to navigate your way around them. Initially it looks quite confusing, but actually all the buttons that the driver needs are up the top here, so they're pretty much in sight line, and you can sort of navigate from the rocker switch, which is just there as well, so you don't really have to look at it too much.
It's not just the interior of the UK cars that will be spec'd well either. Mechanically, they are also a rung up from the base spec of the American cars.
Because in the UK, all the Corvette Stingrays are going to come with something called the Z51 package, which adds, well, an awful lot. And I can, by the way, obviously say Z51, not Z51, because it's coming to the UK. Anyway, cracking on. Aerodynamics, that's where we'll start. So we've got this front splitter here, which allied to the rear wing adds up to 180 kilos of downforce. At what speed, they haven't quite specified yet, but we'll come back to top speed in a minute. Walking down the side here, tyres. So we've got 19s at the front, 20s at the rear, we've got staggered, and these get a Michelin Pilot Sport 4S as opposed to the all seasons that come as standard in the US. Bigger brakes as well, still by Brembo, an inch bigger at the front though, and half an inch bigger at the rear. There's also more brake cooling, so for the fronts it's hidden in here, and for the backs, if you actually sort of get down, you can see it's attached, there's a sort of scoop attached to the lower control arm. We've got double wishbones all round. Talking of cooling, we've got transmission cooler, and we've also got an added radiator in this left-hand side scoop here. I'm talking of asymmetry, wing mirrors. They're actually slightly different lengths on each side of the car. One of those things, once you've seen it, you cannot unsee it. Moving down to the back of the car, suspension. So we've got firmer springs and dampers all round, but this car, if I open up the rear deck here, you can see, thanks to the little wires on top here, has the optional MagneRide dampers, which we'll again come back to in a bit. Cavernous rear boot here, which is sort of, well, so big frankly because you can remove that roof panel and store it in here. It is a Targa, which is something Corvette's done for a while. Soft close boot as well. Down at the rear, we've got a shorter final drive on this car, so hence a slightly lower top speed but better acceleration. You've also got an electronically controlled limited slip diff, and we get the performance exhaust down there, which adds a little more brake horsepower, which is then obviously taken away by the GPF filters. So there we are, the Z51 package.
Those magnetic selective ride control dampers, to give them their full title, cost just under £2,000 by the way, while this car also has a £1,580 front lift system. And I should probably mention that there's also a smaller luggage compartment in the nose too. Anyway, what's it like to drive?
We've got three sort of pre-selected modes in here. So we've got Tour, and that's I think where the magnetic ride dampers really come into their own, because the ride is very good. It's a really comfy car actually. Then we go up to Sport, which is set by the little dial down here, the rotary switch, and then all the way up to Track. However, what I've been doing is pressing the Z button on the steering wheel and then customizing my options on the screen here. To be honest, there hasn't actually been a great deal of customization necessary because I've turned pretty much everything up to the max. The reason being is that actually it feels surprisingly soft, this car. I was expecting something, well, a bit more aggressive, to be honest. I think some of it's because of the looks really. It's all angular and sharp and mid-engined and looks very supercar. But to drive, it's just not quite as hardcore as I thought. It doesn't feel bombastically quick. You've really got to rev the engine, but it doesn't sort of come out to a sort of spine-tingling crescendo at the top end. And even with the dampers in their firmest setting, there's still a bit of roll, and it will turn in nice and quickly, but there's just a bit of a delay. It's not sort of tack sharp into the corners. There's a nice balance, but again, a little bit of understeer first, which you can neutralise with the throttle, but it's not super pointy. There's a bit of sort of GT about it.
Of course, it's still quick, but even though it will do 0 to 62 miles an hour in the threes, it somehow doesn't feel quite as quick as I was expecting. But then it does weigh 15-30 kilos dry, which is not inconsiderable.
Yes, when you turn into corners, everything just needs to be allowed to settle a bit, and you don't have sort of really sort of direct connection to the front end. I can't decide whether I like the steering in its actually slightly lighter sort of sport setting as opposed to the track setting. If anything, you just dull the steering back a bit, and it just makes everything feel a little bit more lively. I'd be intrigued to try this car on bumpier British roads, because I think the Magna Ride dampers would actually work very well there. Having said that, although I think the Magna Ride dampers will work well in the UK, I'd actually like to try the standard passive dampers as well, because that might just give a bit more feedback and connection. Through a corner, you can just start to feel the front end push a bit. Even when it does step over the limit, it's still really very smooth. I know I keep coming back to that adjective, but it's appropriate. That electronically controlled limb slip diff does a nice job of just keeping it all quite relaxed, really.
The Tremec double clutch gearbox is cut from the same silky cloth. It is quick, but also so refined that if you told me it was a good auto, I'd believe you. It all adds up to a car that I think will do two things. Firstly, not shock those that have been used to a front-engine Corvette. It feels like an easy introduction to mid-engine life. Secondly, it will be very, very usable, playing nice in the day-to-day that makes up so much of even a sports car's life.
It feels like there's more to come. More to come from the engine, more to come from the chassis as well. And I suppose when we get a Z06 version, maybe even a ZL1 eventually, I think this could be pretty incredible.
Will we see more Stingrays in the UK? I'd be shocked if we didn't. The showroom appeal is undeniable, with sharp looks, a great interior, and the attraction of an NA V8 and a sea of Turbo 6s. All of that in a package that won't be a pain when you take it through the drive-thru at McDonald's. Thank you very much indeed for watching. To make sure you don't miss out on any future episodes when perhaps we drive the Corvette in the UK and put it up against some of its rivals, please do make sure you're subscribed to the channel. We're trying to hit 1 million subscribers just as soon as possible, and every little helps. Thank you.